Well, first thing, Git is a fast and lightweight distributed version control system used for tracking changes in code during software development. So what does that actually mean? Well, here's kind of how we need to think about this. And you can think about this really with anything, not just code, right? But if we think about setting down and writing code, if we don't have a version control system, the way most of us do it is we would have some server located somewhere and we would have a folder on that server that we would keep our code in. As long as it's very simple and it's just you, that might work okay. The problem comes into when you start going through revisions, chances are I'm going to have a folder for each revision. And then inside each of that folder, I'm going to have a Word document that tells me what's different from revision to revision. And then if I've got features or if I've got bug fixes I'm adding to it, well, I'm going to have folders for those. And then I've got to figure out ways to merge all that information together. And then on top of all that, if I want to revert back to something, it becomes pretty complicated, right? And it becomes really complicated when we start looking at not just me working on code, but we start looking at a team that's working on code. Now, all of a sudden, maybe we have a production code. We've got one person that's working on a bug issue. We've got somebody else that's working on features. And you've got to get all that information merged together into one file that would be the latest file. And so that becomes very complicated if we kind of do what's known as a kind of a centralized storage type system, right? So what Git uses is Git uses a distributed system. And all the distributed system means is that from basically every person has a full system or all the files. Think about it that way. So I could have a remote repository that has all of my files and my tracking that's in it. And then on each computer of my team, they're going to have that full repository that's going to have all of the snapshots in it, everything that's there. And so that makes it really easy because now everybody's got the full repository. And even if I lose my remote repository, then it's not that big a deal, right? And so what actually is a local repository? Well, think of it this way. A local repository is really nothing more than a working directory. And the working directory is nothing more than the files you're working on along with a repository that's in it. That repository is hidden, so it's a hidden file. You won't see it unless you go in and unhide them. But the repository is where you're going to be keeping, or Git is going to be tracking all of the changes that you're making. So you got your working directory, which is the folder you're in. You've got your file that you're going to be working on. And then what happens is as I make changes to my file, I'm going to do something known as a commit. And you can think of a commit as a snapshot, if you want to think of it that way. And that commit then gets saved within that repository. Also within the repository, when you make it, you automatically get something known as a master branch. A good analogy of a master or really any type of branch is think of it as a folder, right? So if that's not really what it is, I don't want anybody to walk away from here and say, hey, the branch is a folder, because that's not what it is. But it's a good way to think about it, because I can have my master branch, which is most of the time our production code. And then if you think about what we would probably do is if I wanted to work on it, I'd make a copy of that master code and I would put it in another folder and I would work on it in that folder. Well, that's kind of what a branch is. We can actually branch off from that master into other branches like features or bug issues. And it gives us a place to work that doesn't affect the code that's in the master branch. All right, so we'll get more into branching as we get a little bit later on in the presentation, and we'll talk about, the different types of branches there are and how you can make a branch and how you can actually change between branches that are there. So That's what a working directory is. Again, it's nothing more than a folder that's got your file, your information in it you're working on, and then the repository that is saving all of your information in it. The other thing to know about Git is you will hear the term GitHub. Git is basically a open source, free version control system. GitHub and Bitbucket, and there's some more out there, are basically hosting services that will host your repository for you. And so that way I don't have to set one up in my organization if I don't want to. I can actually set one up on GitHub. It's remote, it's in the cloud, and then I can actually pull and push files from GitHub.